I've been doing videos about life in Vietnam, where to live in Vietnam, the cost of living in different parts of the country, the language, the culture, the food. I've also talked about the legal processes that revolve around the work permits, retirement, and the marriage process, how you come here to get married and stay long term. Today, I want to recap some of these older ideas that I've talked about before because they keep coming up. And regardless of how many times I say retirement isn't a thing in Vietnam, I keep getting challenged. Maybe you don't believe me. Maybe you don't trust me. Maybe some horrible YouTuber that claims to be a lawyer has told you something different and that's your go-to answer. Or even worse, one of your friends told you that they've been living in Vietnam long term and they've been retired, but they negated to tell you that they've been living on a fake business visa for the last 10, 15 years prior to the 2020 law changes, or they've been a teacher in Vietnam for however many years living on work permits, or they got married in Vietnam and just got a marriage certificate that allowed them to stay in Vietnam a little longer than most people. Whatever the case might be, today I want to talk about if you can even retire in Vietnam and what are some alternatives to retirement to stay in Vietnam long term. And before we get to that, I'm not going to drag you along like a lot of these online professionals keep doing when it comes to this question. Can you retire in Vietnam? The simple answer, no, you cannot. And the complex answer is you can stay here long term, but it's not a permanent solution. And for you guys that love the legalities of all of this law stuff, let me break down a basic one for you. The most recent law relevant to immigration and becoming a citizen of Vietnam goes back to 2020, Decree 16, I believe is the name. And this law is kind of a reform of citizens becoming naturalized in Vietnam. This was intended for Vietnamese people that were born abroad, not born in Vietnam, that want to come back to Vietnam and become Vietnamese citizens. Now, through all this mess of the law, there is a small beacon of hope in there where it talks about non-Vietnamese citizens that are non-born in Vietnam that want to come to Vietnam and become a Vietnamese citizen. And in general, breaking the law down, it's overly complex. And I've talked to 2 lawyers, I've talked to a bunch of older Vietnamese out here that have friends that are back and forth and family. Nobody knows anybody that's ever actually completed this law and got it approved. However, if you guys are older, you're Vietnamese, you're watching this, and you've lived in America, Orange County, Portland, Oregon, stuff like that, back in the 80s and 90s, there's this white dude. And I forgot his name. I tried to find him on Google. I just can't find him. But he used to be this white guy that was a Vietnamese citizen, fluent Vietnamese. And he was part of the MTV Paris by Night. He used to do karaoke songs with Min Tuet, Johnny Dang. Jesus, dude, I am old. And I'm way too ingrained in Vietnamese culture. But he is the only one that I can think of that was actually naturalized into the Vietnamese government and approved for this. Past that, nobody knows anybody. But when it comes to the law, let me break down what's actually happening with it. If you do go through this process and it gets approved, you pretty much have to change your name to a Vietnamese name. You have to already have some type of residence, being a TRC or a marriage certificate. You have to have a clear background, the same background check you do for a work permit if you're a teacher out here. And you have to have proof that you have money to survive in Vietnam. Now, this is kind of where things are weird. There's no time frame. And I talked to one of my lawyers about this, and they said the law doesn't really indicate a time frame for how much money you need to have, so you can't really multiply money by time to know how much money the government requires. But I'm assuming if you make it this far within this process, they will let you know. But this is kind of what Vietnam law is, vague. And the final part, that red flags for me, and hopefully it red flags for anybody else that goes through this, if you do become naturalized through Vietnam law, they require you to revoke your old passport. So if you're coming from a Western society, having a Democratic or Republic passport, this is literally a life sentence. This is a horrible idea. And if this statement confuses you or you don't understand why this is a horrible idea, go talk to your Vietnamese friends in Vietnam that have been trying to get visas to go to America, Canada, or Australia. Most of them are going to tell you they've been working on it for the last 5 or 10 years. Vietnamese have some of the hardest times to get out of the country legally. So for you to throw that away to be in their same situation, that's just insane to me. That's a red flag, no pun intended. So either way, that's the actual process. 99% of you won't even make it through that process. 100% of you should not want to do that process. But for the complex answer of yes, you can stay in Vietnam long term, let's talk about those 2 options. The first one is working as an English teacher or a different field. And this can include IT support, some type of factory work, including oil refinery, and finally international management positions. Now this type of a job is typically reserved for Japanese and Korean people coming out here to work for Samsung, Sony, and Honda. It's a little harder for Westerners. We typically, as Westerners though, we focus more on factory work, engineering work, IT work, and English teaching. And the second option is just getting married in Vietnam. The process itself takes about 6 months to A to B, complete everything, and this will get you into Vietnam at a longer term. Now, it's important to understand that these two options allow you to stay in Vietnam long term, but they only give you temporary residence cards being between the years of 1 year to 5 years. These are not permanent solutions. This is not a legal retirement means to stay in Vietnam. And just to give you an example, because a lot of people love to debate this, if you get married, you just keep renewing your TRC card. During the pandemic, a lot of Aussies in Vung Tau were actually removed. They were not allowed to renew their TRCs, or they were just asked to leave until further notice, meaning their resident card did not hold value when the government was like, we gotta change some stuff out here. So understand, you are still under the control of the government in regards to staying long term. This is a long-term solution, it is not a permanent one. Now, I need to make this clear because people are going to start calling me out or trying to say, oh, well, this one guy told me this. I am not your lawyer. If you are working on getting a work permit through a school, an oil factory company, a business, IT company, talk to your company. They have their people that get you your work permits. They know exactly what needs to happen during that time. If you are getting married in Vietnam as a non-citizen to a citizen, get a lawyer. Do not try to do the paperwork on your own to save yourself $30, $40. Get a lawyer. You do not understand what you're walking into, so why would you start signing stuff blindly? Use it as a reference point, but get legal advice or assistance from your companies before you start signing these documents. So let's go over those two options of how you can stay in here long term and talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of each. Working in Vietnam, being a teacher, being an engineer, or being part of a management team are the top 3 ways that people come out to Vietnam and get work permits. Now, typically to get these jobs, you need to have a degree in that preferred field. So if you're going for oil, you need an engineering degree. If you're going for a management position, you need a management degree. The only exception to this are native English speakers that do not need a degree in English teaching, but do need a bachelor's degree in some kind of field. Now, if you are a non-native speaker, Filipino for example, you will need a required English degree. But a teacher does require a certification of a 120-hour TEFL. If you don't have that, you will not qualify for a work permit. Check the link below, get it done over the weekend. You need to have this document. Now, if you do plan on applying for a job that is not teaching, do not come out here to Vietnam. Go to Vung Tau. Go to the shipyard military base, knock on the door, ask them to apply as an engineer. You will either get shot, you'll get arrested, or they'll start laughing and point to the nearest bar thinking you're crazy. You need to apply for these jobs online. And when it comes to non-teaching jobs, you need to understand what the legalities are of your contract, the terms and conditions, and what's required from you. When it comes to working in Vietnam as a teacher, we can sign a contract and walk away. And typically the schools can't do anything because it's too complex, it's not worth it, and the turnaround for teachers is excessively high. However, for government-based jobs that involve the military and the government, such as engineering, management, stuff like this, there are actual punishments that can happen if you disappear on your contract, or if you decide, I don't want to be an engineer, I want to go to just be an English teacher, it pays more, or I like the hours better. You can be blacklisted from the country almost immediately. You are directly dealing with government and joint venture companies which are linked to the government. So make sure you understand the contracts you're signing for these jobs. They are not the same as a teaching contract. Whatever the case is though, when you first get here, all these jobs are going to get you on a business visa. Business visas can run between 3 months to 12 months. Most people don't actually get work permits. When you work as an engineer out here, you're typically on a contract of 12 to 18 months. These people typically don't get work permits. They don't need them because they're under an agreement contract for a short-term gig. If you're a teacher though, you're required to get a work permit. The reason for that is not longevity, it's because you are not legally allowed to teach on a business visa. Business visas, through the laws of Vietnam government, are not intended for anything past like 45 days. I believe is a date, I could be wrong, but the point case being, you cannot sit on a business visa for an entire year being an English teacher. Because if the police come in there and they see, oh, this guy's been here for 9 months teaching on this business visa, the school will be fined. Typically, schools within the first month are gonna wanna see your documents, your paperwork, your embassy stamp stuff, because they need to start pushing your paperwork immediately. Police and the government want to find these schools that are not doing this, because the amount of fines that they charge these schools for not doing the work permit for you is excessively high. They want you to not do the work permit because they get paid. If you are working for anything outside of English teaching, a business visa is typically where it stops. If you're working as a teacher, a work permit's where you need to go. Now, when it comes to staying longer, the next step is a TRC. This is a temporary residence card. They last between 1 to 2 years for a teacher or anyone in pretty much work-related stuff. The benefit of this is you become visa exempt. You no longer have to do visa runs. You no longer have to update your business visa every 12 months. You're exempt. This is a benefit for people that are out here long term. This goes back to option 2, how to stay in Vietnam long term, is a TRC. You can renew them within the country through the major cities like Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, or Da Nang, and you never have to leave the country, which is an awesome thing, but you have to stay in this job pretty much indefinitely. Now again, a lot of this stuff keeps changing. So when you're going through this process, your company is gonna work you through it. It doesn't matter if you're working for an engineering company, an IT company, a management company, or even a school. They're gonna get you through the process because they have to get you through the process. If your company says you don't need a work permit, they probably know best. But if it's a school telling you that, I would be a little concerned. Now I need to dig a little deeper into this English side of this because I get asked this all the time, that you can work in Vietnam without a degree. This is 100% without a doubt impossible to do. It is illegal. You can't even work in Vietnam long term on a business visa, as we just talked about and why. So if you are out here working as a teacher without a degree, or you're not on it, or you're just on a business visa, understand that there is a bounty on your head. The government and the police do not go after you directly. So don't think that you're gonna see the police at your door one day saying you need to pay a fine. They go after the schools. They go after the business owners and they attack their money. If they attack the business owner's money, you really think you're gonna stay there? The fines are ranged between 10 to 90 million Vietnamese dong per incident, per teacher. So if you are working without a degree in Vietnam, without being on the proper work permit, or at least on the path from business visa to work permit, your school's being fined, your school's being threatened, your school's jeopardizing its own business permits to have you there. They're not gonna do that. So stop thinking you can work in Vietnam without a degree. It is not possible. And for you guys that do private tutoring, and you don't have a degree, or you have a degree but you're not working for a company, you're just on tourist visas, this is to an extent okay. They are cracking down on it, they as in the government. Vietnamese are notorious for having students come to their houses and they teach them the final exam or help them and tutor them on the side. The government since 2022 has started to crack down on this. This has to do a lot with the pandemic. And what they're doing is teachers that bring students to their house and teach, they get paid on the side. The government's starting to tax these people. They haven't been able to tax Westerners because how? Like really, how do you prove a lot of this stuff? And that would require the government to go directly after foreigners, which is not gonna happen at that level. So if you are doing basic tutoring, you have a couple kids on the weekend, it's just kind of a side gig, you're not dependent on the money, you're gonna be okay. If you are running 3 to 5, 6, 7 different classes, tutoring on the side at parks, coffee shops, stuff like that, you will be found. Because you're gonna be talked about on Facebook, Reddit, Zalo, all this stuff's gonna happen. The government is watching all this stuff. They know about this stuff. And when you become a bit too big, they start going after the problem. And again, they're not gonna go after you. They're gonna go after these students. They're gonna be like, why are you paying this teacher to privately teach you? They might actually start finding the students for hiring you. So keep that in mind. Vietnam does not typically go after foreigners directly. They go after the Vietnamese because it's easier. They have control over the citizens. They don't have control over you and me like that. They can kick us out, sure, but they can't sit there and threaten us with money. It typically doesn't work. Even the police pulling us over, most of the time it's like, can you give us 200K, we'll leave you alone. They can't even write us a citation, even if you have a driver's license here, because they don't know how to deal with it. So in short, there is no way to work in Vietnam as a teacher without a degree. And for you guys that want to say no, I challenge any lawyer, any YouTuber, any 65-year-old Aussie guy, or any current teacher on this. You cannot teach English in Vietnam legally long-term without a degree. It breaks all the rules. And if you look at different videos of lawyers in Vietnam, there's a lot of Vietnamese lawyers on YouTube that talk about this stuff. And they title the videos, How to Live in Vietnam Long-Term, How to Retire in Vietnam. If you skip to the very end of a lot of these videos, they pretty much say you have to get married. That is the sum of it all. And that leads us into the final part of how to stay in Vietnam long-term, marriage. So getting married in Vietnam will give you a longer TRC, and this is all you're getting. If you get a work permit at a school, you're getting a 1 to 2 year TRC. If you're getting married in Vietnam, you're getting a 5-year TRC. It's just a visa exemption, so you don't have to do visa runs in those 5 years. You're good to go, and you can renew it within the country. So if you do decide to go this route and you get married, you're gonna have some paperwork to get together. Now, when it comes to this process, again, get a lawyer. Do not try to do this stuff on your own. It doesn't work in your favor. There are some things here and there you can do on your own, but there's a lot of legalities that you have to have a lawyer to get done. It's just the way it is. You're getting married in a foreign nation. Don't think you can just pay some random agent to get this done for you. And plus, you're signing documents you probably can't understand. Get a lawyer. A general idea of what you need is you need to prove that you're not married in your home country, that you're mentally stable to make decisions on your own, and that you can afford to stay in Vietnam for X days. Now with this one, because the TRC is 5 years at maximum, I'm assuming that it's gonna be money times 5 being the years, on the amount of money you have. Can you survive in Vietnam on 5 years without having to work? And this money has to be deposited into a Vietnamese bank. And if you've seen the community posts I've been doing lately, the Vietnam government is starting to crack down on how we as foreigners and Vietnamese citizens can even access that money. So do keep that in mind. Do some research on the banking system and the new regulations in 2024. They are cracking down on how we can take money out of the bank. I could not go to a bank right now and pull out 50 million Vietnamese dong without the police involved. A Vietnamese citizen cannot pull out 10 million Vietnamese dong, which is like $410, without getting special approval. Things are getting different here real fast. So now when it comes to money, you're also gonna have to talk about paying money to the family of the bride or the husband that you're marrying. This isn't like bride money per se. This is what we call like a dowry. This is money that you pay to the family to marry their daughter. There's a lot to it, like when it comes to religion and definitions. Sadly though, in Vietnam, it's pretty much a paycheck or a bonus or a negotiation. Typically, if you're a Westerner, they're gonna ask for more money. If you're Vietnamese, they're gonna ask for a couple $1,000s. Westerners, I've heard them pay up to $10,000 to $20,000, which is insane, where the Vietnamese counterpart would be like $1,000 or $2,000. So find out what this is beforehand. Your wife or your future wife should already know these numbers because the father's gonna bring it up. The mother-in-law is gonna bring it up at some point. Not to you, but to them. Now, my 2 cents in relationship advice. This is just from me growing up in Vietnamese culture, understanding it from the ground up, and seeing so many Western people in Vietnam getting married to Vietnamese and seeing the downfall and the positives of it all. Let me give you my thoughts on it and how to get ready for it the best you can. The first thing is know who your wife is. If you're marrying this person, understand who they are, live with them for a while, or have them live with you. I know a lot of families in Vietnam might not approve of this, so you can find your way around it, that's on you, but you need to know who she is. Many guys that I've met out here that have got married to Vietnamese girls thought they were marrying a sweet country girl. And a lot of people say that, like, get out of the city, go to the countryside, go to Dalat, go to Phan Thiet, and find a good Vietnamese girl, marry her, and you'll be okay. You'll get a traditional girl. A lot of these guys find out that their girl, their wife, was actually just a prop. She was a business transaction for something much bigger. You weren't the first husband. And I know this sounds crazy, but this is actually something that goes on quite a lot in Vietnam. And if you go to Google and Google buy a Vietnamese wife, you're gonna get a lot of adverts. This isn't an uncommon practice in Vietnam. So understand who your wife is before you marry her. Don't just jump into a Tinder date and then 2 days later be like, let's get married. Understand who she is. Take a few months. Don't rush this, because this could be a huge mistake if you sign that document and you find out that she was just a bar girl, or she was doing this for transactional reasons or to get money for her family only. This had nothing to do with you and her. The culture of Vietnam when it comes to relationships is not the same as the West. And speaking of the culture, get to know the family, get to know the mother and father-in-law very well. If this family is serious about the marriage, if their daughter or your future wife or husband is serious about this marriage, you're gonna be introduced to the family. You're gonna start spending more time with the family, staying at the family's house, going to outings with the family. Get to know them. Some of the most explosive divorces I've seen in Vietnam between Western people and Vietnamese has been because of the mother-in-laws. It's not the wife, it's not the husband, it's the mother-in-law. Because what happens after a few months, a few years, is they start getting too tired. They get hurt. They get sick and they need to move in with you. Or they're like, hey, I'll wash your TV for free. Can we stay with you? Like a vampire, Once you let them into the door, they never leave, and they suck the life out of you. I'm not saying all Vietnamese families are like this, but it is not uncommon to see. I think well over 70% of the divorces I've seen in Vietnam, and it's been like 40 or 50 of them, have been because of the mother-in-law. It wasn't the wife, it was the mother-in-law, it was the family that destroyed the whole thing. So get to know the wife, get to know the husband, whatever your case is, and get to know who the family is. Don't take it at face value. Don't meet some pretty thing on Tinder and be like, I'll marry her. She's 18, she has to be good. She's from the countryside. That mentality will F you in the long run. And most of all, if you do decide to get married in Vietnam, that means you're gonna stay in Vietnam for a long time. Come out here for 3 to 6 months. Really live in the culture, in the countries that you are. Because when you come to Vietnam, a lot of people, they go to like Hanoi, they go to Saigon, District 1, District 7, District 3, District 5 sometimes. They go to Da Nang. These are beautiful, really fun, exciting cities in Vietnam. But this isn't truly what Vietnam is. Da Nang is one of the best cities I think I've been in Asia. It is not a reflection of what Vietnam is. When you come here and you decide where you want to live, stay there for 3 to 6 months. Live in a traditional Vietnamese normal house that a normal Vietnamese would, where you would with them. A lot of people do not understand that when you come to Vietnam, the tourist areas, the locals are super nice. They work with your Vietnamese. They understand you. They're friendly. They're super cool people. Here's a slap in the face for you. Once you get out of these tourist areas of Vietnam, most people are dickheads. Most people are inconsiderate. Most people are selfish. Most people are trying to cheat you. I'm not saying this is everybody in Vietnam, but you're gonna meet a lot of people that are a-holes. And I think living in the countryside is where I met most of them. When you're in a tourist area, they're getting money based on them being nice to you. So of course they're gonna be nice. Of course they're gonna help you. Of course they're gonna listen to your horrible Vietnamese and be like, oh yeah, you speak so well. And of course they're gonna tell you you're so handsome. They want your money, bro. And they're working their way into them. They're finagling you. They're fanoosing the goose, as they say. So when you do decide to live here long term, live here long term first. Don't just be like, District 1 is so beautiful, Vietnam's amazing. It's not that way. So I hope that answered a lot of the questions about staying in Vietnam long term. This is something for 2024 and forward. Obviously the rules are gonna change. They keep changing. I see regulations changing all the time out here. So make sure you contact a lawyer. Make sure you talk to your company, regardless of what kind of job it is. And if you're getting married or what you're doing, make sure you know legally what you need to do. And don't just jump in it. Make sure you're getting legal assistance. Vietnam is a communist nation. This means you need to understand what you're signing. Don't be a fool. And if you're giving up your passport, truly sit down and think about what you're doing. If your family lives in America or Canada or Europe, and you are signing over and you got approved for this program and you give up that passport, you may never see your family again. Because you can't just disappear. You cannot just get a visa because, hey, I'm white, I'm black, I used to have an American or Canadian passport, give me a visa. They're gonna be like, no, you gotta go through the same process as Win and Chan over there. I just said Chan like a Chinese person. But the point case being, be ready for what you're about to get into. Do the homework, do the research, be in documents, be in the wife or the family, do your research. Because at the end of the day, saving $20 or saving a couple hours worth of paperwork is not worth the lifetime of stress that it could bring to you for not understanding what's going on. So I hope that answered that question of how to retire in Vietnam, or at least stay long-term, and the myth busted on the idea that you can even retire in Vietnam. If you have any other questions, if you have any other concerns, if you're confused about something in this video, leave a comment below. I'll answer the best I can. But I think this is the video I'm gonna start referencing to people when they ask, why can't I retire in Vietnam? Never could have. Till then, guys, I will see you again.
Who wants smoke with me? Who wants smoke with me? Who wants smoke with me? Who wants smoke with C? Who wants smoke with me? Who wants